Hi everyone, I'm the Book Guy and welcome back to another year of book reviews. We're going to start this year off with a bang and talk about a very highly requested series, The Bound and the Broken by Ryan Cahill. This is a dragon riding fantasy that has been making waves in the book community for the last couple of years, and now that I've read it, I totally see why. Some quick facts about the series. Ryan started writing it during COVID lockdowns in 2020 and self-published it at the end of that year. Yes, this started out as an indie series. It was successful surprisingly quickly, and by 2024 it had sold 100,000 copies. That's when Ryan was offered a traditional publishing contract. Right now there are 4 novels in the series, with the 5th and final one coming out in 2028. Plus there are 3 novellas, so shorter books set between each of the novels, with the 4th of these novellas coming out this year in 2026. So we are going to discuss all of them today. Now, this series does start out as a very stereotypical fantasy. It's a very familiar story. I felt like the first book was quite predictable and full of the usual fantasy tropes. Yet, this series has a truly extreme increase in quality the further it goes on. One of the sharpest improvement curves I've ever seen. I think books 3 and 4 in particular are top tier fantasy. So this is a series that really rewards you for sticking with it. So I'm going to review the whole series today spoiler-free. I'm going to be objective, honest, listing strengths and weaknesses, because ultimately I want to help you decide if this is the right series for you. So let's begin. Long ago, there used to be dragons. The Order of Dragons were the guardians of peace and justice before they were corrupted by greed and betrayed by the Dragon Guard. Now the Lorien Empire rules in their stead. The land of Etheria has become a battleground for the last 400 years, marred by rebellions, uprising, and brutal oppression. Deep in the southern lands, in a small village known as the Glade, 3 young boys are about to be tested in the proving. Kaelin, Rist, and Dan are about to participate in a trial to prove themselves as adults. But when strangers come to town, guarding a terrible secret, these boys will be plunged into a world at war, and find that adulthood is much more than they bargained for. There is no chosen one, no prophecy, no epic ballad of golden heroes. This is a world that is harsh and unforgiving and unfair. Yet it is a world that cries out for justice. Now, before we address the series on a whole, we need to first address the elephant in the room. In reviewing all the books in this series, I feel like I need to put book 1 in a category all on its own, because it's so different to everything else. In fact, when I was looking up other people's reviews online to prepare for this one, I found that any negative reviews were primarily about book 1, and most of the positive reviews were for people who had read further into the series. It was that clear of a divide. Now, the truth is, book 1 is not terrible, not by any measure. I quite enjoyed it, it's just so very familiar. The plot is so stereotypical of the fantasy genre, filled with all the classic tropes. There's an evil empire, dragons are long gone, and there's a boy on a farm about to go on an epic quest.
I've heard this bedtime story before.
The plot even follows a very predictable structure. I honestly predicted every major story beat of the first book. I mean, it's quite literally Aragon and the Eye of the World just mashed together into a hybrid story. Kiss, kiss. There's even similar fantasy names. Like there's evil monsters called Fades, and there's magic swords called Nithral, which is very similar to Mithril. There's even Wind Runners. But Of Blood and Fire still works as a novel, and is fun to read for a few reasons. First, this is classic fantasy. I know there's a strong push for fantasy to be 100% original, but it is welcoming to rediscover that old fantasy you know and love. Reading book 1 felt like coming home to the Shire. It reminded me why I love this genre. It's no exaggeration to say that the first book made me feel the same way I felt when I read The Eye of the World as a 16-year-old boy dipping his toe in fantasy for the first time.
Little Terry did not see that coming.
Second, the style of the story is modernized, so the world is a little more grimdark. Not hugely, but enough to feel different. The story can be violent, people die, and the world can be very unfair. Plus, people swear when the situation calls for it. They say f*** and don't give a shit about YouTube's monetization processes and content warnings. To be clear, the series does not go full Game of Thrones, not by any means, but it is a step in that direction, so it feels a little bit grittier than normal. And third, my goodness, the writing is gorgeous. I just loved the prose in this book. Every single line was beautiful, poetic, mesmerizing. Ryan Cahill takes these old tropes and breathes such fresh life into them, reinvigorating these old concepts with wonder and awe. Still, there are some further weaknesses to book one. I found that there wasn't much to distinguish one character from another. They were all a little bit flat with not much personality. That was probably my only real disappointment with book one. I'm okay with predictable plots, but flat characters don't really work for me. However, it was the character writing that saw the single greatest improvement going deeper into the series. Later, this becomes a character-driven story. All the characters have layers and personality and uniqueness. It was crazy. I even wondered if I'd read the first book wrong and went back to check. But no, I think in many ways, book one is Ryan's practice novel, which is why I put it in its own category today. It's still quite enjoyable, it introduces the key concepts of the plot and the setting for this world, but I must emphasize, it's simply not an accurate reflection of the quality of the rest of the series. This is the world of Etheria. One big continent that has spent 400 years at near constant war since the collapse of the Dragon Order. This world has humans and elves, dwarves, dragons, and the monstrous Uraks. There are also many gods in the pantheon, most notably the traitor god Ephialtia. So yeah, this is a very Tolkien-esque world. If I were to be unflattering, you might call it Middle-earth 2.0, which you may find nothing wrong with that. Sounds like a good time. There's a few things still that make this world special. First is the magic system. So we have mages and dragon riders and some extra secret stuff I can't really get into. When this is all introduced in the first book, it's a little similar to the Wheel of Time. I mean, people draw from the one power. They draw from the spark, and they weave the 5 threads of power, the air, fire, water, earth, and spirit. Yet this magic becomes a feature of the story with some clever uses and leads to some pretty incredible action sequences too. The ultimate expression of the spark is drawing on all threads at once to create a soul blade, or a Nithral, the only thing capable of killing a Fade. It takes a ton of practice to perfect this technique, so it's the character arc equivalent of going Super Saiyan. You have to earn it.
You can't just call it, you have to earn it.
However, all usage of the spark can be dangerous, because it's not just drawing from an infinite wellspring in the sky, you're drawing from your own soul. People who overdraw can permanently ruin themselves in some nasty ways.
There is always a cost.
I also really like the depiction of empire. So in Etheria, the Lorien Empire is in the north and they are the big bad guy of the whole series, yet the way they're written is just so damn compelling. The Empire is not purely evil like the Star Wars Empire. Sure, they're definitely bad, they oppress people, and may commit the occasional act of genocide, but this Empire has a really good PR team. The common people don't really mind the Empire. They fear it and respect it, but don't exactly hate it. And I really like this. Evil governments are rarely openly evil in real life. They use lies and propaganda to claim legitimacy. That's how they get people to go along with their schemes. Tyrants usually have a very high approval rating. And that's what we have here, and I think it's a much more nuanced take on empires. In addition, the Empire uses fiefdoms, which I thought was particularly clever. So the Empire doesn't own the southern lands, but the lords of the south have sworn fealty to the northern Lorien Empire, so they act in its stead. This was a common tactic in the Middle Ages, especially in Ireland, where Ryan Cahill is from. I'm pretty sure that's what he's referencing, I don't know for certain. But essentially, when the English/Normans first invaded Ireland in the 12th century, they pressured the Irish kings to swear fealty to the English and pay them taxes in exchange for being allowed to keep their lands and titles.
It's just morally wrong.
This use of fiefdoms allowed the English to claim a certain legitimacy, like the land truly belonged to them since the rightful rulers had signed an agreement. The Lorien Empire uses this technique too. I thought it was a marvelous world-building idea to explore. It means the Empire is not exactly pure evil. They have some legal rights to claim ownership here, which gives the story much more moral grayness. Rather than have the Empire be cartoonishly evil. One last world building detail is the dragons. Now, we don't know much about them at the start of the series, other than the Order of Dragons were betrayed and wiped out, and now there's not many dragons left. Now, those betrayers are the same dragon riders who currently form the Dragon Guard, the Empire's most loyal and feared servants. I should mention here, people with magic tend to have very long lives, so it's those same dragon riders who betrayed the Order 400 years ago that are still active today. If anyone really tries to fight back against the Empire, then the powerful Dragon Guard come and set them on fire. But no one really knows how or why they did what they did. Although we do know that since this great betrayal, there have been no new dragon eggs hatched in over 400 years. People believe that the gods have cursed the race of dragons in punishment for this great sin. Dragons are now at risk of extinction. This is a fun little mystery that the series explores. This series has plot lines that are very focused on the characters and they're deeply intertwined. Like I said, this becomes a character-led drama. So we're going to look at 5 protagonists and their 5 respective plot lines. We're going to do it spoiler-free, and it's all to give you an idea of what happens in the books over the course of this series and if you want to read them all. First, the Caelan Briar plot. Now, this guy is main character number 1. And look, his story starts out a little bit predictable. I mean, no dragon egg has hatched in 400 years. And here's a protagonist from a small village, like the plot just writes itself at this point. But Caelan's plot ended up being fantastic, because he's not the chosen one. He's not the prophesied savior of the world, he's just some guy, and I loved this. I mean, I admit, this is a personal preference here, but I hate when main characters have main character syndrome. When they're always the smartest person in every room, the strongest, the ultimate man's man, prophesied and destined for fame and greatness. I know a lot of people love this type of story, and no hate to you, that truly is fine. Stories like that can be inspiring. But personally, I like my characters to be human, not superhuman. Caelan's quest may focus a lot on dragons, but it's ultimately just about that. Being human. He's trying his best to contribute to the fight, to master his skills and help save as many people as possible, but the odds are stacked against him. He makes mistakes, and he can be rash and reckless, and he fails from time to time. And his morality is shaken when he realizes just what he might be required to do in order to win. Second, Dan Pym is absolutely our comedy character, but he's damn good at it. There's always a risk that a comedy character is going to be more like Jar Jar Binks, more annoying than actually likable. That's not a problem here. Dan is genuinely funny, but also he's still full of fear and determination, so there's depth to him as well. Now, his plot is just, very broadly speaking, about rebellion. So he's just a regular soldier, no special powers, no force-sensitive abilities, and he's often near the front lines of battle. He's the most human character of all. Also, his arch-nemesis is a bird, and the fight with the bird does not go well for him.
I'm losing to a bird!
Third, Rist Havel is our third boy from the same village. Now, I don't want to spoil some things that happen in book 1, so I'll just say, Rist ends up working with the Empire. He just goes there to study and learn. It's not like he's trying to be evil. He didn't actively make a choice to be evil.
Here I go killing again.
Rist is a fascinating story of how easy it is to find yourself on the wrong side. Maybe he serves out of duty, loyalty, and love for his friends, his country, or his commanding officer. Sometimes it's hard to know if your side is telling you the truth.
Are we the baddies?
Rist himself is a great character. Now, he's written very much as if he has autism, at least that was my perspective of it. So he's fascinated by his books and his learning, he's very socially awkward, he's unintentionally blunt and speaks his mind, so he's a very easy character to cheer for, which makes his role in the story all the more bittersweet. Let's look at just 2 more. So we have Ella Briar, so Caelan's older sister. Ella also has a giant wolf as her best friend, Fienia. Now, Ella's story starts out pretty simple. She leaves her small town to go and get married and start a new life. Yet the events of her brother's plotline mean that now the Empire is coming for her. So she has to go on the run to escape the Empire's agents, and there's no one she can trust. While her story begins as a desperate bid for survival, Ella's plot ends up going through the most changes, a true metamorphosis. She discovers ancient secrets from the old world, lost knowledge, and undiscovered mysteries. I really can't say any more and it's killing me, but her plot really pushes the boundaries of the lore and expands on what we think is possible. And one last character / plot is Dane Atires. This is the best character, with the best plot line, just telling you now. So Dane gets introduced in Book 2. His parents were lords of the South who swore fealty to the Empire, but tried to stage an uprising to free their country, leading to them being betrayed and killed. Now Dane has sworn to bring vengeance and justice upon his parents' killers and free his kingdom. His path is full of darkness and death. Just how far will he go in his quest? This plotline is all about reclaiming a throne and killing his enemies, but Dane gets pretty damn close to the edge of just straight up becoming a bad dude. This guy has Shakespearean levels of character depth and complexity. Much like Richard III, his ambition could bring about his own downfall.
Now is the winter of our discontent.
His internal struggle is amazing. Dane just stole the whole series for me. Now, this series is not just entertaining and cool, it's also really bloody deep. A dragon riding fantasy does have the potential to just have only mindless action scenes and offer nothing much more than a painfully obvious wish fulfillment fantasy where the reader can live out their dreams. But this series has a rich, deep story filled with many layers of meaning. Let's look at a few. First, there is no chosen one. You might think Caelan would be a chosen one considering the rarity of the events surrounding him, yet Caelan ends up where he does almost by accident. There is no higher power that guided him there. There is no destiny or fate. Most importantly, there is no safety net. Caelan does not have the plot armor of a chosen one. He's just a regular guy. Now, I mentioned before that I do like stories where the main character is human, not superhuman, but it's more than that. The premise of this story is that no one is guaranteed to succeed. Heroes can fall. You can try your best and still fail. And I appreciate the wisdom in this worldview, much like the great Captain Jean-Luc Picard once said.
It is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not a weakness. That is life.
This theme gives the whole story more tension and makes us care about the characters a whole lot more because failure is a very real possibility. The second big theme is the way it depicts good and evil. Now, old school fantasy used to have a pretty black and white depiction of good versus evil. They were hard binaries. But over time, people wanted more nuance. And then we got the Game of Thrones standard, which is a bit more like there is no good and evil because everyone's evil. Well, I believe that Bound and the Broken has a different take, and I describe it as there is no good and evil because everyone is good.
Man is good.
And I know I'm very much oversimplifying this, but the villains of this story are shown in a very compassionate light. They are broken, hurting people who have lost their way, or they're so convinced that they're doing the right thing that they have become utterly self-deluded. None of them really want to be evil. To be clear, the story does not in any way excuse or enable evil behavior. Instead, it tries to understand how the person got there, and even consider if it's possible to turn someone back to the light. This series is full of redemption, characters who have fallen from grace and want to rise above their past mistakes. Overall, I really appreciated this good versus evil discussion. It may not be exactly my personal beliefs, but I found it enlightening and challenging to consider a more compassionate worldview of people. The whole story was more interesting for exploring this theme. Now, I have given this story a lot of praise so far, but let me raise one potential issue I had with it. Now, it's not necessarily a criticism, but something to consider. There are many ways to include dragons in a story. You can make them big or small, wild animals or intelligent creatures, all sorts of things. Now, there's no single perfect universal way to write dragons. You've got to write them in whatever way suits your story best. However, the dragons in The Bound and the Broken are different to every other example I've seen of dragons, and there are some drawbacks to this particular style. There's pros and cons. Let's take a look. So, avoiding spoilers here, when dragons hatch in this series, they become soul bonded to their rider. It's a magical, instantaneous joining that makes them perfectly aligned. Essentially, they become one soul in two bodies. The bond is closer than any other possible bond that humans can experience. In fact, you might even say it's like the romance trope, fated mates, where there's love at first sight and you're instantly bonded for life and linked in heart, mind, and soul to your one perfect mate. This type of dragon is okay, but I think there's something lost in this depiction because dragons fundamentally need to add tension to the story. Tension comes from uncertainty, but there's no uncertainty when the dragon is perfectly bonded to their rider. Let me give you two examples of dragons adding tension to a story. So first you can have wild dragons, like you have in Game of Thrones. These guys are not just big and powerful, they're also wild and dangerous animals. As Daenerys often says, you also have the How to Train Your Dragon example, where these are animals that you don't master or control. You have to have a relationship built on trust. You have to earn it. And you have to be worthy of it. If you try to control a wild animal, they might turn on you. This makes them unpredictable and risky to be around, therefore tension. But the dragons in this series are perfectly synchronized to the rider by magic. They are obedient. In fact, you might even call them fully domesticated. And I think they lose some of their risk factor. They're not dangerous anymore. And the fact that magic forms the bond between them instantly means that the character doesn't have to earn it. The power they gain from bonding with the dragon just happens without any sacrifice or cost. As a second example, you can also have intelligent dragons, like the usual dragon riding story, like Aragon or Songs of Chaos. These dragons are essentially people. They're characters. And again, the rider cannot simply dominate them. There has to be a negotiation process and a building of a relationship. It may not be dangerous, life-threatening tension, but it's relationship tension or character tension. They have to work at getting along to earn the bond between them. You can also have evil, intelligent dragons like Smaug in The Hobbit. You can only beat these guys by being crafty, charming, and outsmarting them. So this is something else lost in making the dragons in Bound and the Broken domesticated, is that the rider is their master absolutely. This makes the dragons obedient animals and they become much less threatening. I'm going to be a bit mean here, so brace yourself. If the dragon is so perfectly obedient, then why make them dragons? If they don't have a will of their own and there's no chance of them disagreeing with their rider, then they kind of have no more impact on the story than if the character had a big sword. The dragons function as a tool. It's an interesting tool with fantastical abilities, but still a tool. And I did find it frustrating at times. Now, I admit, a lot of this is just my personal preference. In truth, this take on dragons is not necessarily a bad thing. I focused on cons, but there are some pros to it as well. There is a trade-off for writing them this way. Let's look at a few pros. One big advantage is that it avoids retelling the same old story. We've seen the dragon riding story quite a bit, ever since the 60s and the Dragon Riders of Pern kind of popularized the concept. It's a familiar fantasy trope. By making the rider and the dragon bond instantly with magic, we can just skip that process and save a lot of time, and therefore the series gets to focus on other storylines that are a little bit more interesting and original. So that's pretty cool. Second, the focus is placed entirely on the rider. So instead of focusing on two characters and the relationship between them, we just get to focus much, much deeper on our main character instead. That's where the story spends its time, and it's time well spent. Our main dragon rider is an extremely well-developed character. And third, the dragon's moral alignment matches up to whatever the rider's moral alignment is. So because the dragons are so obedient and loyal to their rider, they follow their instructions for good or for evil. So good riders have good dragons and bad riders have bad dragons. This is a fun concept to play around with. Sometimes the dragons make you cheer when they arrive on the battlefield, and other times they make you cower in terror. So like I said, the dragons have pros and cons in how they influence this story. I still think dragons should add more tension to the story through their unpredictability, but this works too. This is a pretty long series with some big books. You may be wondering, is it worth sticking with it all the way through? So let me give you an idea of the overall direction of the series. First, you gotta know, this has a pretty extreme case of page creep. where each book has a higher page number than the one before. Now, some series have this a little bit, like Dresden Files goes from 300 pages to 500 pages. Ooh. But yeah, this series goes from 500 pages in book 1 to 1,500 pages in book 4. Yikes! Books 3 and 4 in particular are just huge. In fact, book 4 is the size of 3 book 1s. And yet, the second thing you should know is that this series stays on course. This is just amazing to me, and I love it. I have read so many big series that are only big because they keep introducing new stuff. And then the series gets completely sidetracked from the initial premise that actually got us interested in reading it in the first place. I'm just going to name and shame here. I think the Demon Cycle and the Lightbringer series do this more than anything, where we get introduced to a story that should take 3 books, but then so many new characters and new plot lines come along to stretch out the story. And as a reader, you're like, this isn't what I signed up for. Sorry, had to get that off my chest.
Apparently that's a trigger for me. Yeah.
But that's what The Bound and the Broken does so well. Despite the fact that it's a 5-book series with each book going so long, it remains focused on the same goal. We get the same characters and the same plot lines that we committed to, and we get to go deeper and further with them. It never felt like we were getting sidetracked, and that is exactly the story I signed up for. Thank you, Ryan. Third, it's just very, very long. So think of it like the Wheel of Time. It's not necessarily too complex or hard to comprehend. It's easy to keep track of it all. It just requires such a high volume of reading. You got to spend a lot of time in this one place. So you may need some decent reading muscles to tackle this one. Alright, let's look at the 3 shorter books in this series. So here's a fun fact. I rarely read novellas and short story collections. That's just a personal thing. I'm not that interested in shorter stories. I only read the first novella, The Fall, because it came included with the first audiobook. Also, by the way, you can get a free copy of The Fall if you sign up to Ryan's newsletter. So I only read this novella because it was just handed to me. Then I realized it was quite good. In fact, all 3 of them are pretty good. It's made me second guess my whole stance on reading shorter books. So all 3 novellas are basically prequels, focused on different key events in the past. None of them are absolutely essential to the main story, but they add a lot of context and meaning, especially for the characters who lived it. And they're just good stories. The first novella is The Fall, and it's about the collapse of the Dragon Order. It's a prequel that takes place 400 years before the main story, and it gives a lot of context into how the Order fell and why. At only 100 pages long, it's a frantic, desperate battle that is ultimately tragic in nature. Heroes are betrayed and a stronghold falls. Now, there is some debate as to whether you should read the first book or the first novella first. I personally think you should read the novel, but it is reader's choice. Either one is really fine. However, from that point on, there is a set reading order. The Exile is considered book 2.5. It should absolutely be read after book 2. This is the prequel story of Dana Tires. You know, the best character, the guy out for revenge. Well, this is his prequel story, and you should read it after book 2 because that's where Dane is introduced. This novella is about the death of his parents and his long quest to kill everyone responsible. It's probably the darkest and most violent events in the series, and it really showcases Dane's mindset, where he's focused on revenge to the exclusion of all else. His tunnel vision can be his biggest weakness. Finally, The Ice is about Aeson Veranda. Now, I haven't mentioned him yet, but Aeson is the wise old elf mentor of the story. Think of him like Ben Kenobi. This is his prequel story about his quest to find a dragon egg. This story actually has a fair amount of horror. There's some creepy, scary, gross things in this one. In fact, it proves that Ryan Cahill would make a damn good horror writer if he ever went to the dark side. So like I said, none of these novellas are essential, but they add a lot of depth to the characters and to the wider world. Plus, I think they showcase some of Ryan's best writing. There's a lot of women in this series. Now, I do think the first book is a very male-heavy story, but from the second book onwards, there is a solid female presence too. Ella, in particular, is very well written. She's not a damsel in distress, but has proper agency and involvement in the story. It's also worth noting that the world itself is very egalitarian, so men and women are quite equally respected in this world. Most notably, there are women as soldiers in all of the action scenes. Although, this does mean we get to watch a lot of women die horrible, violent deaths. Which, I guess that's what I wanted? Anyway, there's lots of races here too. Now, they're not the races of our world, but we see many examples of racial prejudice explored in this series. There's a lot of mistrust between the elves and the dwarves, elves and humans, elves and other elves.
Or Scots and other Scots.
There's a fantastic depiction of autism in the character Rist Havel. He thinks in straight lines and he gets confused by social cues, but he's also not an over-the-top stereotypical autistic character that we often see. It's a wonderfully humanizing depiction. There's not a lot of LGBT characters in this series, but there is one very clear example of a bisexual woman. Now, it's not just a subtle blink and you'll miss it reference, she's pretty in your face about it. So I appreciate that even though there's not a lot of rep here, it's also not shy when it does show up. As for the content warning, well, first, there's a lot of swearing. And I'm not just talking about blood and ashes, we're talking proper F-bombs on a semi-regular basis. Also, there's a little bit more blood and violence than we normally get in classic fantasy. To be clear, this is not a grimdark story at all, but let's just say, when a dragon breathes fire, the story really shows how it messes people up. So think of it as the story doesn't hide the brutality of war. That said, despite its grittier nature, there's still almost nothing in the way of darker content or sexual references, so there's nothing to make you too uncomfortable. Is the ending worth it? So I mentioned right at the start that Ryan Cahill has been picked up by a traditional publisher. For the last 5 years, he's published his books about 1 year apart, but that's because indie authors can do it that quickly. Now that he's going traditional, his final book is getting a much more thorough release in 2028. So currently, the whole series is being re-released with new covers and a lot of fanfare and advertisement. We've got a bit of a wait left before us before the final book comes out, although the 4th novella is coming out this year to hopefully ease our waiting pains. As it stands, the 4th book of Empires and Dust is arguably the best in the series. It's the biggest, true, but still the best. So I would say it's worth sticking with the series because it only gets better as it goes. I'm very confident that the final book will be worth the wait. And how much should you try? Well, I do think that to see what all the fuss is about, you've really got to read past book 1. That book is still very enjoyable, but doesn't truly reflect how good the series gets. The series rewards you for sticking with it, so my recommendation is to try at least 2 books to see if it works for you. And that's all I've got for you today. That's The Bound and the Broken, so I hope you now know if it's going to be right for you. Good luck and happy reading. Thank you for watching. Now, if you like dragons, you should join me again next week. I'm going to be reviewing Elliot Brooks' series, Dark Shores, which has some big old scaly lizards, so can't wait to talk about that one. And subscribe to the Book Guy channel for more book reviews like this. Let me know what you think of The Bound and the Broken, and if you might want to give it a try after watching this video. Let me know if you disagree with my take on dragons. I am always happy to talk about dragonology. If you want to support the work I'm doing, please consider checking out my own books, The Immortal Investigations, a urban fantasy series. You can also check out my online shop for merch and t-shirts like this one, and join me on Patreon as well. So I'll see you next time. Until then, I hope you enjoy a good book today. Bye!